think step one is to find people that fit with your culture in the first place, right? So in interviewing, in your first steps, in your first kind of looking, like you need to have a kind of clear idea of what it is that you want in the people that work with you. It's kind of like finding friends or relationships of any other sort. You're looking for people that really fit with your personality and with the personality of your business as a whole. If somebody doesn't fit well with you, it's going to be hard for you to kind of intake them into your culture, right? Into your business culture, that is. So you want to look for people that are already kind of the same mindset and of the same drive that you're looking for. So for me, generally, we're looking for, proactive go-getters, right? Problem solvers, especially for remote work. You want somebody who can tackle the problem themselves and come to you when either they have a set of solutions and they're not sure which solution to go with, or they're not finding good solutions, so they need some help with that.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to From Crisis to Justice. I'm your host, Parag Amin. Today, I am joined by Chris Brown, not the Chris Brown you may have initially thought of, the singer and dancer, but a different Chris Brown, one who doesn't have any allegations against him regarding misactions relating to any ex-girlfriends at all. This Chris Brown is the CTO and partner at WOW Remote Teams, a staffing and recruiting firm that connects U.S. businesses with top-tier talent from Latin America. He's got nearly 2 decades of experience in technology, leadership, software development, business automation, and digital marketing. He also specializes in scaling businesses through strategic staffing solutions and nearshore outsourcing. He helps companies save tremendous amounts on salary expenses through his global talent acquisitions business, and he helps a lot with remote staffing. So appreciate you being on today, Chris. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's great to be on with you.
Yeah, so in terms of remote staffing, this is big these days in terms of a lot of companies are hiring remotely, but then we're also hearing a lot of establishments, whether it's private companies or the government, whether it's state government or federal government, asking employees to come back to the office. So where do you think remote work will go into the future? Do you think that we're still going to have remote work? And what advantages do you foresee remote work having versus in-person type work?
I don't see it going away at any point in the future. I mean, everybody I know that has remote work or does remote work loves working remotely. There are plenty of people that like to go to the office, and there's plenty of businesses that prefer people in the office because they see, a benefit in some way. But it's hard to have people who were working full-time remote or even most time remote or part-time remote and have them go full return to office. I've seen a lot of people that are leaving positions that have full-time return to office and are looking for just remote positions or at least hybrid model positions. The way we work is a purely remote setup. None of our people are working in office, except the 2 of us that are here in the U.S. We work in our office together, but we don't otherwise have any of our remote workers come into an office. And then all of the people that we staff into client companies, all of those are remote positions. We're staffing 100% remote. So all of our clients, they come in knowing that they're looking for remote workers, right? It's a major part of our proposition is that we're looking for people who can work remotely, that have the ability to do so, have the technology to do so, have the internet connection to do so. They should be fully set up and prepared to go and not need office space or need additional equipment or anything like that in order to be able to do their job fully.
Okay, so when it comes to remote workers, I know that one big concern is the safety of the data and the control of the data and the security and safety of whatever equipment that they're using to do the work. Do you have any tips or thoughts for any business owners who are either using remote employees or considering hiring remote employees in terms of how to help ensure that the data is secure?
Well, there's a couple different options. It really depends on what your data setup is and what your environment is. So I see a lot of people using like US computers with a VPN or a US server, right? So you're actually remote working through a US, piece or US technology. That way the data isn't actually leaving the home server. You're just working on it through there. There's a bunch of different ways you can set that up so that the data is not actually like copyable or downloadable or anything to the primary device. It's mostly just about how you set up those systems in order to do that. And then, it's a bit about data security at that point. Kind of what are you working in and what are you working with? So legal firms like yourself or accounting firms and things like that will have higher levels of security of data that's needed. But from there, you're talking about kind of trust with your workers. So there's the initial level of trust, which is like background checks and interviews and those kind of things, where you make sure that this is somebody you want to work with, this is somebody you can trust. Make sure their background check comes back clean, that they look like a person who would be a good person to work with your data in the first place, whether that's a remote worker, an in-office worker, right? You need to be confident that the person that you're bringing on board is somebody that you want to have access to the data you have anyways. And then outside of that, you're just looking at, what are the systems, what are the contracts that you have in place with these people. So if you're not doing, full on remote servers or, VPN or, looking through that kind of thing, maybe you're sending equipment yourself or just doing the setup yourself on their own equipment. So there's a couple different options where, you purchase the equipment, you set it up in-house, you provide all of your security layers and everything else onto the equipment itself, and then you send that equipment to the workers and have them work on that device just for you, right? So it should not be a personal device in any way. It should be only their work device. The other option is to set up either take their personal device and run your own security software on it, right? So you remote into their device, you set it up with the security software that you need with your integration so that you can have your own kind of data layer on that. And then the other option from there is to set up your own virtual machine inside their own devices. So it'd be kind of a hybrid between the two, where you go in, you set up a virtual machine, say running Windows, and then you set up your full suite of software that you need to work on and all of your access and everything within that virtual machine. And that way the machine they're working on is virtually separate from the machine that they're working on personally. So there's a few different options for, data security and levels of data security there. It really comes down to what are you doing? What is the level of security that you need? And, what are you looking for in your outcomes with these people, right? Because each of those has their own drawbacks as well when you're talking about how difficult is it to work with these kind of technologies, right? So if you're working remotely and you're remotely logging into a system that's a different server and then working inside that server like as a a remote desktop or a virtual machine somewhere in the cloud or something like that, then there's latency issues, there's drag issues, you have problems where it just takes a little bit longer to do any of these kind of processes. So it's a little bit about what does that look like for your business and how does it work best for you.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, even from the perspective of building culture with a remote team, do you have any thoughts on how one builds and promotes culture with a virtual team?
Yeah, I mean, I think step one is to find people that fit with your culture in the first place, right? So in interviewing, in your first steps, in your first kind of looking, like you need to have a kind of clear idea of what it is that you want in the people that work with you. It's kind of like finding friends or relationships of any other sort. You're looking for people that really fit with your personality and with the personality of your business as a whole. If somebody doesn't fit well with you, it's going to be hard for you to kind of intake them into your culture, right? Into your business culture, that is. So you want to look for people that are already kind of the same mindset and of the same drive that you're looking for. So for me, generally, we're looking for, proactive go-getters, right? Problem solvers, especially for remote work. You want somebody who can tackle the problem themselves and come to you when either they have a set of solutions and they're not sure which solution to go with, or they're not finding good solutions, so they need some help with that. But that's just for me personally. If it works different for you, then it's about identifying how does that work for you. And then from there, it's about what is your style of kind of leadership in that role. In office is a bit different than remote, of course, because we're not in person, we're not seeing each other face to face, we're not touching each other, which it's a different kind of thing. But you still have the same sort of idea, right? How often are you communicating? What kind of communication style do you have? Is it all purely business communication? Are you very like strict in that it's just what you need to talk about is what you need to get done today? Or is it kind of fluid and interactive and like more friendly, right? So it's a bit about, how is your style of leadership and what works best for you? And then again, coming back to finding people that really fit with that kind of style. And that can be a little bit hard when you're talking about like 15 or 20-minute interviews. How do you really get a grasp on somebody? But coming up with good interview questions, coming up with a good idea of what does it look like to interact with somebody, and giving them enough time to kind of calm their nerves, because interviews are always a bit of a nervous situation for both sides, but more for the worker than for the employer generally. To let them calm down a bit, let them get settled, and then get an idea of if their personality fits with kind of the culture that you're looking for and the ideas of how you want to work and how you like to work.
Yeah, absolutely. One big thing I'm a big proponent of is testing, because
Hmm.
when it comes to interviews in general, there are some people who interview very well because they're charismatic, they're articulate, they're just very personable, and others who may not be that same way personality wise, but who may realistically be a much better skill fit in terms of the work that actually needs to be done. So I'm an avid proponent, and we do this for our hires, of having a test that actually simulates some of the work they might be doing. I'm curious to hear if you run similar kinds of tests, or if you do any kind of formal personality tests like disc assessments or other things that you're requiring these potential workers to go through to decide if they are a good culture fit or a good skill fit.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we do. Of course, we're running pre-vetting and pre-interviewing everybody. We have our own internal metrics and our own internal tools that we're running to make sure that candidates fit like what we would like to see if we were hiring somebody. But I see a lot of clients come in with their own tools, like a culture index seems to be a big one. People come and they have everybody that they're going to interview. They take their culture index survey before they come and get into an interview. And then outside of that, that's really cultural fit, and that's really kind of personality fit. And then you have task fitting, right? So different kinds of positions will have different kinds of testing for the job itself. Especially once you get up into more technical roles, they'll have very structured testing for software developers and IT positions and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah. And so, as you sit here today, Chris, how many people would you estimate that you, through your company, you either personally or through your company, have hired?
Oh, a few hundred at least. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
over the course of a few years, probably close to 1,000.
Okay. And so, are there any best practices that you can give us in terms of through that recruiting and hiring process?
Yeah, I mean, number one is come in with a clear idea of what it is that you're looking for. Know what the tasking is, know what the job is that you need, know what you would like to see in a good fit for your position. Like, know, again, coming back to the cultural thing, have a good idea of what is a good cultural fit for you. And that can be a little bit difficult, especially when you're smaller. If you're in your first 5 or 10 hires or whatever, or your first 2 or 3, it can be difficult to know like what is a good fit for this position. And at that point, it's a lot about going through a bunch of people, interviewing quite a bit, getting an idea of what do people's personalities look like, what does it look like to work with someone versus be friendly with someone, what does it look like for someone to be stressed, for someone to be on task, for someone to be off task, for someone to have a good day, for someone to have a bad day, right? We're all human. We all have the same sort of thing happening to us. We all have random things outside our world that happen to us, and then we bring them in with us. Like, how do you manage that? How do you work around that? Getting an idea of what is it that you look for when you're doing these things, and kind of asking questions around that. So good interview prep is really a thing that takes a while to get good at, but coming in with a good set of questions. And now we have AI, all these AI tools, they're not super creative, but they're really good at informational. So they're taking, you can go ask them like, here's my position, here's an outline of what I'm trying to do, what are good questions for this position? And any of the current AI tools will come up with a list of questions that are pretty good and pretty well suited. They might not be exactly what you're looking for, but they'll get you close, right? And from there, you can kind of mold it to, what do you need and what are you looking for? And then how does that fit with what you're doing?
Hmm. And when it comes to we'll call them yellow flags. I think red flags are much easier to deal with when you deal with an interview. And I think the most challenging components of an interview are the yellow flags, the ones where you're a little bit uncertain. You have a little bit of uneasiness about something or an issue, but on the balance, let's say the person seems positive. And in terms of those hires, at least in my experience, those yellow flags usually have ended up becoming a much bigger issue. I think that could just be a component of higher pressure, and very little tolerance for mistakes. But in some environments that are different from, for example, my firm, may have a higher tolerance for mistakes. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on yellow flags during an interview and dealing with those. Meaning, is that enough to not hire, or do you hire and then do you track it, or how do you handle it?
I'd say it really depends on the position, because some positions there's just not enough candidates to really be like, well, I'm not going to hire because of this one flag that came up that I didn't like, right? If you really need to hire and it's the best candidate that you found, but there's one thing that you don't like about it, they're not able to make your 8 a.m. meeting, but otherwise they're a great candidate. Something I'm not sure, but that's just a quick thought. Um, you know, Sometimes it's worth it to just hire and make the trial and see how it goes and try to work around it and see how you massage that out. But a lot of times, if you have doubts and if you have a position where you're just like, I don't know if they fit, I don't know if that's a good way to go about this, I don't know if that yellow flag's gonna be a red flag, it's usually better to wait and interview more people. It's better to go through a different round, go look for more and see, are they the best fit? Because you're looking for the best fit. And we're all humans. We all have our yellow flags. We all have some, idiosyncrasies that just are a little bit odd about each of us. So you're looking for the best fit, and sometimes it is the best fit, depending on the position, the role, and the experience needed, and a lot of other factors. But many times, if something is giving you pause, if something's making you think, I don't know, this just doesn't feel right. I don't think that this is like everything else is great, but this one thing just really catches my eye. Give it time, right? Take a break on it. It's very rare that you don't have time. These are generally not high pressure decisions, and if they are, then either you have a very unique position that you may need to overlook the yellow flags to fill because it's so unique, or somebody's putting pressure on it that might not need to be there.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to cultural norms and differences as well, one thing, and then that can create some yellow flags. One thing I've heard from you during our discussion is that you hire primarily in Latin American countries, and so is that a cultural? Is there a cultural reason for that? Is that a time zone region? What logic is there for the just primarily focusing on Latin American countries rather than the worldwide workforce for remote work?
Well, it's partially that focusing. Well, firstly, my CEO is from Colombia, so she has a background in hiring people in Latin America. She's been an executive down there for many years. So, and then now she lives in the U.S. So it came with a knowledge base, a connection network, right? It came with a way to get into the market space. There's also a bit of a differentiation for us, right? There's a lot of companies that are doing outsourcing all over the world. There's tons of people hiring in the Philippines and India and Eastern Europe and things like that. I mean, there's other companies, of course, doing Latin America, but it gave us a kind of a niche to drill down into. As far as culture, the culture fit is really good with the U.S. I see quite a bit of clients that come over that already have people in Philippines or India or the Eastern Europe, and they see that it's hard to find people that really give you pushback in those kind of cultures for some reason. I don't know what that is. I'm not part of any of those cultures, but a lot of what I hear is that they see a lot of yes men. People will tell them that they can do the thing, that they're on it, that they're blah blah blah, and then it doesn't get done, and it doesn't get done the way that they want. I think Latin America has more of a cultural fit with the U.S., which is more of a kind of capitalistic, kind of entrepreneurial, kind of go getter, go finish the job, go find the solution for yourself. Sort of be realistic about what you can do and how you can do it, and get it done the best you can do it. The other big selling point, of course, is time zone, right? Latin America is directly south of us, which means that all the time zones line up fairly well. So you're not trying to work with somebody at 2 or 3 in the morning. Either they're working at 2 in the morning or you're working at 2 in the morning, which usually means you're working at 2 in the morning because you're the one that's pressuring to get the task done correctly. Everybody's working during the day, same hour, same sort of time zone. So it matches up really well with American and Canadian companies.
Mm-hmm. And have you found certain countries or people from certain kinds of cities, like smaller cities or bigger cities, tend to be better than others?
I don't know about better. We hire primarily out of Colombia and Mexico. Again, my CEO is from Bogota, Colombia, so she has a bit of an attachment to there. And then Mexico has a massive population because they're just a very large country, and they're directly south of us. So again, cultural fit, and as well as just the sheer volume of people that are available. Other than that, I, the cool thing about the way we work and that we all work remotely is that you can hire people out of little towns that wouldn't have otherwise had an opportunity to do something like this. So big cities are, they're nice. You get more kind of an upbeat kind of crowd, but little towns, you start to get people that otherwise didn't have this opportunity before, but now they all have laptops and they all have great internet. So there's no reason not to. And then you end up with interesting situations where, like, you go and it's their birthday, so of course you want to send your employees a gift on their birthday, so you call us and you say, hey, I know it's their birthday, can you help me get them some flowers or some chocolates or whatever. And we look around the little town, we have our virtual assistants call down and find somebody that'll do it, and you go to deliver it and you find out that the lady that owns the flower shop is the aunt of the lady of the person you have working, so she's going and delivering flowers to her niece for her birthday from you. It's a lot of interesting things like that happen where you really feel that you're having an effect because you're working with people in little towns that are just they were off the map for us previously, and over the last 5-10 years we've really been able to impact those communities.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. I really like that. So these people from these smaller towns, especially, how do they find you, or do you find them?
Both. So, I mean, we have a recruiting team that's working every day, all day, full time team of there's like 6 people on the team currently. So they're doing outreach to anybody and everybody who looks like their skill set is qualifies. So you're going through lots of different places. I mean, LinkedIn kind of places. There's a few of them in Latin America. Each country kind of will have its own place. Then you can go through the databases of the universities of the major universities in each area. They all have online courses now. So all these people in smaller towns are able to take online courses and get degrees without actually having to go live in the big city. And some people go live in the big city and do the whole university experience. So it's just kind of there's a plethora of different avenues to take to find people. You're looking everywhere and everywhere. As you get into more niche positions, you start looking at like groups and Facebook groups and industry groups and looking for registrations and things like that, and looking for offshoots. Like if you have a group of Java developers in Guatemala or something, you can go through and add those contacts to your list and start asking them and saying, hey, by the way, we have this thing that we're doing. If you're interested in looking for more jobs, like send us your profile, and then as we find something that fits, we'll start bringing you in. Yeah, so it's just an ongoing motion of contacting as many people as you can that look like they'd be qualified for the things that you're generally doing, and then running a recruiting motion that brings on all of those people, but also is out looking for much more bespoke kind of stuff. Like um, there was one position we had that was looking for Scala developers, which is a fairly uncommon programming language, and that was a lot of work because those people are hard to find. So you're out there doing that motion of looking for groups of people who might know Scala, you are in the kind of technology groups that you're talking about on Facebook or on Twitter or X or whatever, or and various different places, and then contacting all of them and trying to get in contact with them. So it's just for us, it's a very large outreach motion where we're doing this all the time and trying to get as wide a network as we can so that we can find the best people that are, it doesn't matter to us, where they are in Latin America, but what town they're in. And yeah, that can be a little bit difficult sometimes, but yeah.
Right. And I think, that's a big component when you say it could be a little bit difficult just to put some numbers around that. What percentage of people would you say where you reach out cold actually respond back?
Uh, Probably 5-ish%. Yeah. You're talking. It depends. I would say longer term, it's probably a little bit higher than that, just because we'll hit them multiple times and kind of keep pestering. You know, it's a marketing motion at the end of the day. It's a little bit easier to get more uptake because you're offering jobs in the U.S. So you know you get a little bit better response rate. But there's lots of people who aren't looking for a job or are happy with what they're doing. They're not going to respond to you. You know.
Right.
Other than that, there's always the kind of warm inbound side of that, which is we're posting jobs. We're posting jobs all over the local posting boards, the LinkedIn boards, the major posting boards. You know, there's lots of different posting places, and then you get a lot of warm inbound from that kind of thing, and that's a total different kind of uptake place. But you know, those people are very interested in finding a job, and they're very interested in the job that's currently posted. So there's two sides to that coin happening at all times. So it's a little bit different. But the cold outbound, yeah, you're not. It's not hugely successful on its
Right. It
face.
is. It is challenging, and it's
Yeah,
interesting because the reason I asked is I think sometimes people start out and they fully expect that it should be like a 50% minimum response rate, and the reality of it is far lower. And so, when it comes to the outreach and the outbound component of things, are there certain kind of personalities that you're looking at or looking for when you're reaching out, or is this mostly about just their specific credentials?
yeah. I think on outreach, you're primarily looking for skills and credentials. You're looking for somebody who looks like they could fit the profile of somebody who could do the position. And then you get into interviewing. That's when you find out what their personality is like, what their cultural fit is like. And then, you know, once kind of you're reaching out, you're hopefully looking for somebody who has experience doing remote work so that you don't really have to spin them into that and like train them up on how remote work works. But for the most part, you know, we're looking for people who would otherwise match the qualifications of here's the job posting, here's what's needed, here's the remote work, you know, here's the time zone, but that's generally going to fit unless you're very off on coasts or something. Um, yeah, and then you get into pre-vetting, you know, you get into our initial rounds of interviews, which happen before a client would ever see them. And that sort of tells us, you know, whether they fit that kind of model, right? Are they go-getters? Are they, you know, are they hungry essentially? Do they look like they're going to go solve a problem by themselves and really take care of this problem?
Right. And so, a part of that, speaking of problems and solving problems, I think a big part of any kind of hiring is compliance. And so, how do you all keep track of compliance in these various countries? And are there third party companies you're using to help with compliance and payroll? Or are you dealing with it directly?
So for the most part, we're dealing with it directly. We have employer of record and agent of record in most of the countries. There's a couple where we use a third party. We have contracts for the people themselves done by lawyers in the home country with us, using our entity in the U.S. or our Colombian entity, but primarily our U.S. entity. And then all of that contracting is done, you know, directly through us in their home language, which is Spanish, except for Brazil, where it's Portuguese. And then, you know, everything in the US side, so everything on the client side is done with us as a US company. So there's nothing for the client is seeing an international touch point. Everything is done as a US company, invoicing them as a US company, you know, the whole thing there. We handle all the HR, we handle all the payments, we handle all the payments down to them. Anything that needs to be done for benefits and taxes based on the home country's needs are taken care of with that contracting that we have set up.
Mm-hmm. And I think a big part and a big concern for people is the productivity of their remote workers. Once you've hired them, compliance is fine. Are there any tools or tactics that you recommend to help ensure the productivity of remote workers without necessarily having them feel as if you're micromanaging them?
Yeah. I mean, number one, of course, is always to know what you expect, right? Have good, you know, everybody talks about KPIs, right? But have a good idea of what it is that needs to be accomplished on a regular basis and make sure that they're meeting those tasks. You know, you should, if you're hiring somebody, you should have a very clear idea of what it is you're hiring them to do and what you expect of them over the longer term, whether that be, you know, the next 6 months, the next 5 years. You know, what does that look like for you for them to be accomplishing the tasks that they're getting done? Then there's also software we use Hubstaff internally that tracks all their hours. That, you know, it takes screenshots of your screen and make sure you're on task and doing all these things. Um, nobody's really looking at that. But every now and then you have an issue, and somebody comes back to you and says, "Hey, I think that they're falsifying these timesheets or something like that," and then you can go look and say, "Okay, well, were they actually working? Were they just clicking randomly on a screen or something?" So there's tools to measure, that things are actually getting done. But I come back to the primary thing is making sure that, like, A, what the work is that needs to be done, and B, how do you measure that it's being done? How are you making sure that it's being done effectively and moving your business forward, right? Because every position you hire is it's an investment. It's an investment in your business. And the idea is for this to be moving a process forward in a way that you shouldn't be having to micromanage. If you're micromanaging it, then it's still a problem for you, right? So yeah, I think it's majorly on making sure you know what the tasking is and making sure it's getting done and getting done the way you need it to get done.
Right, absolutely. And so, where do you foresee the future of remote work in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think it's going to be more or less the same that as it is now, or do you think it's going to be different? And if you think it's going to be different, how do you think it's going to be different?
It's a good question. I lean towards saying it's basically going to be the same. I'm not sure how much different it could be. Again, we have people, everybody we have on board is working full time remotely. So there's not a lot of change going on there. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of talk about AI and all these different pieces that are coming up and how that might change how people work and how people do things. And honestly, it's changed how we work. I mean, we use it internally all the time. And, it changes how you get things done and the way your processes essentially. But remote work itself hasn't actually changed. You need somebody to be available and be online and be thoughtful and be proactive and be a problem solver and be there tackling the issues that you have in order to get things done. And I don't necessarily know that that changes in any way, because I think that's the same kind of thing we've been doing for, a couple hundred years now, as capitalist countries. Like the idea is to be productive and get work done. And I don't know that that's going to change in any major way. Maybe the way we connect will, maybe better tools will come along, but the tools we have are pretty solid at the moment. There's always another communication tool, there's always another way to connect, but how much can you really add? People don't want to be on a video call all day long. Most people don't really like being on video calls much at all, other than when they need to be. So you have that. You have different communication platforms and text communication. We use Microsoft, so we're on Teams, but there's Slack and Google and everything else. They're always coming up with new ways to maintain interactivity and maintain connectivity. But I'm not sure that I have a clear idea on how it could be vastly better or vastly different, because it's already very effective as long as you're doing it right and getting the right people on board to do what you need done.
Right, absolutely. And speaking of effectiveness and getting the right people on board, for somebody who's considering hiring remote staff and making the decision of whether they go with an agency such as yours or try to go their own route, what advice would you give them and why? And, would that advice change depending on how large they've gotten?
Well, my advice would be go try it, go see what you can find, go put the motion in, go put the effort in, and try to find good candidates for your positions, and try to interview some people and try to find somebody that really fits for you. My team is here. We're always recruiting. We're always working. I know I can find good talent. I know I can find great fits for people. We do it every single day. But I think the best way to find out that you need that kind of service is to go try and do it and see if it's difficult for you, right? If you're the kind of person that really enjoys going through a couple hundred resumes in order to schedule out a couple dozen interviews in order to find out that most of them weren't a fit in the first place, please enjoy yourself, like have fun. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to go through that problem set, then we're here to whittle that down to 2 or 3 profiles for you and really show you what's available out there. But the best way to find out what your needs are and what you're really looking for is to go try to do it yourself. As always, I kind of do that with every process that we implement, is that I think I should know how everything works. Right now, that's not true. I don't know how everything works. I'm not created everything, but the first attempt is usually by me. If the first attempt is by somebody else, it's kind of hard to know whether it's successful or not. So
yeah, absolutely. And so when it comes to working with your company, Chris, where can they find you, and how does pricing for that work?
Yeah, we're at wowremoteteams.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Chris Brown, Wow Remote Teams. We're here, we're available. Pricing is really pretty straightforward. It really depends on the role that you need and the position that you're looking for. Our pricing model is all included in the hourly rate that we give people. So there's no upfront costs, there's no retainer costs, there's no upfront fees or anything like that. You just give me a call. I take all your information. I get an idea of what it is you're looking for, and then we go out and we find some profiles that match what we discussed, and then we send those to you, and then those will have an hourly rate attached to them, and then you get to see what is the profile, what is the experience level, what is the skill set, and what is the price range for that skill set. Generally, we're saving 30+% over U.S. salary costs. I mean, remember, you're not paying payroll taxes, you're not paying social security taxes, you're not paying US benefits. So there's a massive amount of savings all across the entire board, especially when you look at total comp. The savings can be really large. So yeah, it's a fairly straightforward process for us, and we try to make it as clear, transparent, and simple as possible for our clients. Our contracts are month to month, but those are contracts with us that are month to month. If you have any issues with talent, we're happy to help you offboard that talent basically as quickly as you need and find more people for that position, which means that I'm not holding you down to 6 month or 1 year contracts. I'm not holding you into a long term. If my value proposition isn't actually valuable to you, you're not going to stay around as a client, and I don't want you to, right? So I'm looking for people who really get a win-win out of this. They get great people, they get pricing, and the people that work for them are having a great job because of it, and they get to work with people in the US, and they get to work in English, and there's benefits on both sides.
Right, absolutely. And so just to put that into perspective in terms of realistically what somebody might be looking at, can you give us a range in terms of the hourly rate that somebody might be paying your company and the type of position?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, general marketing people, if you're looking for digital ad specialists, you're looking in the $15 to $20 an hour range. If you're looking for virtual assistants, generally about $10 an hour for somebody that's going to be doing back-end data entry kind of stuff. They'll all be English speaking, of course. If you need somebody who's going to be on the phone speaking English to English speaking clients, you're looking $15 to $20 an hour there. As you get into higher end positions, you get into developers like web developers, $25, $30 an hour. And then up from there, as you get into specialty developers, they get higher and higher. But again, it's always going to be competitive versus US costs, like very competitive.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And the challenges with the United States are, the costs continue increasing when it comes to employee benefits, et cetera, especially in places like California, where my law firm is based.
Yeah, California and New York, I get a lot of calls from people. People just can't handle the amount of cost that it's involved in U.S. workers anymore.
Right. Yes. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today and enlightening us with some really good insights in terms of remote staffing, because I have no doubt that this will continue to be a growing part of the workforce into the future for the United States due to the increased scrutiny and challenges when it comes to labor laws and expenses and taxes here. So again, thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom and knowledge that you've learned over the years.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the time here. It was great talking to you, and to all your listeners, please go look at Latin America for talent. It doesn't have to be through me in any way. Please go search, because there's amazing people out there and there's amazing talent, and it's really going to broaden your availability and your horizons for your business.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree with that. And to all the listeners, thank you all for joining. Hope you got a lot out of this. I know I did during this conversation with Chris. And if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe so that you hear when the latest podcast is dropping, so we can continue helping you and your business thrive into the future. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.